Hi there, and welcome to Ghostly Trails. I'm Natasha Lamb, and I'm delighted to welcome you to Haunted Yorkshire. There is a lot to cover in this beautiful part of the country, so tonight we'll be keeping to the city of York itself. Over the centuries after the Romans left, it grew into a significant trading centre, and for a time it sat at the heart of Danelaw during the Viking occupation of northern England. As it evolved further through the Middle Ages, much of medieval York survived, echoing its rich mixture of cultures from bygone ages. It stands to reason then that we may stumble across a spectre or two. We'll begin at York's most impressive landmark, York Minster. A church has stood on the site since the 7th century, but the breathtaking building you see today dates mostly onwards from the 13th to the 15th century, having been completed in 1472. Several ghosts have been sighted here. Perhaps the most recognisable apparition is that of a clergyman by the name of Dean Gale, who died in 1702. He was first noticed a few weeks after his death by his successor, who upon giving his first sermon was shocked to see Gale sitting calmly in the choir and gazing back at him. He was overcome with shock and decided to cut short his debut service. Since, Gale has been spotted on several occasions sitting and staring up at the pulpit. Another ghost here hails from almost a century later, striking quite the contrast to the gentle spirit of Dean Gale. A religious fanatic by the name of Jonathan Martin had become increasingly mad, possibly suffering from some kind of health issue after receiving a wound while serving in the Royal Navy. He spent some time in an asylum, and afterwards wrote letters claiming his fellow clergymen were in league with the devil. This behaviour escalated rather sadly when on February the 1st, 1829, Martin hid in York Minster until the visitors had left and it was locked up for the night. He then proceeded to vandalise the place, smashing up the furniture and bundling everything up into a pyre. After lighting his holy bonfire, he smashed a nearby window and fled out into the night. The fire raged on and into the early hours and was extinguished the next morning, damaging much of Minster's medieval interior. Martin was put on trial and showed no remorse for his actions. He firmly believed he was acting on God's orders to cleanse York of its sins. He was taken away to an asylum for the rest of his life, where his belief that his actions were nothing but holy remained unshaken. Ever since, it is said that Martin's ghost can be seen from time to time, jumping around with mad glee as he prepares his bonfire. Shortly after the fire, a newly appointed guard spotted with a mysterious blue light drifting across the nave, startling the dog he had with him. It's possible, of course, that this apparition existed before the fire, but could it have some connection to Martin's mad escapade? A lighter tale here tells of a woman in the 1960s who was standing and admiring the architecture. As restoration was being carried out on the medieval stonework, she noticed one particularly elaborate carving outside the west front of the Minster. As she studied it, she heard the voice of a man beside her. "Do you like it?" he asked. The woman turned to see a small man in a scruffy gown and a cap on his head. "I did that," he said, as she looked at him before vanishing completely in front of her eyes. The Shambles are one of Yorkshire's most popular tourist attractions. These bustling streets of narrow, overhanging medieval buildings give us a tiny glimpse into what life back then might have looked like. In an atmospheric place like this with years of history behind it, it would be strange not to find a ghost here. An investigation in 2010 revealed all kinds of haunted happenings. A ghostly woman in black was spotted descending the staircase in number 44, and the impression of a man carrying a child appeared very briefly to a customer. On another occasion, a ghostly man was seen leaving out the back. When pursued, it seems he had walked into a storeroom which had no exit. But the man was nowhere to be seen. In number 22, poltergeist activity was reported as objects appeared to be flung across the room, whilst a faint sound of a ringing bell could be heard, but not traced. One of York's best-known haunting is just a stone's throw away from the Minster in Chapter House Street. In 1953, a plumber by the name of Harry Martindale was working in the cellar of Treasurer's house. It was a particularly cold and quiet day, so it came as a complete shock to him when the blast of a horn echoed from one corner of the cellar. Wondering how such a sound could possibly penetrate such a place, he was in for an even bigger surprise when the apparition of a Roman soldier on horseback trotted proudly through the wall. This was followed by an entire company of foot soldiers, marching two abreast, carrying swords, lances, and distinctly Roman helmets. And as they went, they took absolutely no notice of Mr. Martindale. He observed that they were marching on a level lower than the cellar, as their knees disappeared through the ground. The curator encouraged him to write down his experience, and it was thanks to his recorded entry that it has become a staple of Yorkshire's ghost lore. Later, archaeological excavations revealed that a Roman military station once stood near Treasurer's house, and a road of the same level had passed directly beneath it. Today, it's in the hands of the National Trust. 1953 seemed to be a particularly paranormal year for York. Over at the Yorkshire Museum, the caretaker made headlines when he spotted the apparition of a man in Edwardian clothing in his library. His account is as follows. I thought he was an odd-looking chap, because he was wearing a frock coat, drainpipe trousers, and had fluffy side whiskers. He had very little hair and walked with a slight stoop. I decided he must be an eccentric professor. The caretaker continued to observe the ghost, who kept muttering, I must find it, as he wandered the building. Finally, the caretaker decided enough was enough. His account continues. He was standing between two tall book racks, pulling first one book and then another from one of the shelves. I thought to myself, this has gone far enough. So, thinking he was deaf, I stretched my right hand out to touch him on the shoulder. But as my hand drew near his coat, he vanished, and the book he had been holding dropped to the floor. Some weeks later, a book was found on the floor near where the ghost had disappeared. Upon inspection, it was noticed that the book had been donated to the library by a certain Alderman Edward Wooler, who had died in the 1920s. When the caretaker was shown a photograph of Alderman Wooler, he immediately recognized it as the ghost he had seen that night. We will continue on our journey to Scarborough. Our ghost here hails from the 14th century and is believed to be that of Piers Gavestone, the son of a Gascon knight. He was a close friend to the ill-fated King Edward II, much to the hatred of the rest of the English nobility. When Edward crossed the English Channel to marry Isabella of France in 1308, Gavestone was honoured with carrying the crown of England. For many of England's barons, this was the last straw and they quickly sprung into action. Thomas of Lancaster, Edward's powerful cousin, demanded Gavestone to be exiled, but Edward refused. Gavestone's influence continued unchecked until, in 1312, the barons revolted against Edward, forcing him to flee to York. He set about raising an army, whilst his friend Gavestone took refuge in the safety of Scarborough Castle. This refuge was short-lived, however, a brief siege saw Gavestone captured and brought to Dedington Castle near Banbury. Somewhere we've actually visited in our Haunted Oxfordshire series. He was taken to Warwickshire and beheaded, but it seems his restless spirit chooses to roam Scarborough Castle. The headless spectre of Gavestone has been spotted amongst the battlements, leaping out of shadows in an attempt to lure unsuspecting visitors to their deaths. This seems to be a tale that's been passed through generations in this city, and his ghost has also been spotted wandering down by South Bay Beach. Moving down into the city, the Grand Hotel in Scarborough was built in 1867 and has hosted all kinds of guests that include both celebrities and royalty. There seems to be a resident ghost, however. Poltergeist activity has been reported in the form of constant knocking, shaking doors, and objects being flung across rooms. Guests have reported hearing both the sound of music and laughter emanating from the ballroom, only to discover the room completely empty when entering. The apparition of a woman in a red gown has been spotted wandering around, and, in one sinister report, the sound of screaming and loud footsteps have been heard down one of the corridors. The woman in red is thought to be the ghost of the novelist and poet Anne Bronte, who died in 1849 when staying in cottages that stood on the site of the present hotel. She was tragically just 29 years old when she died, and her grave can be found in the churchyard of St. Mary's, not far away from the castle, though there is no account of her ghost being seen here. We come now to the seaside town of Whitby, which could easily be considered one of the most haunted towns in the whole of the UK. From the ghost of Grape Lane all the way up Whitby Abbey, we will discover them all. Grape Lane. Many years ago, a young girl by the name of Mary Clark had gone to the bakery that was down here on an errand for her father. The owner, who was a family friend, recognized the girl and welcomed her into the warmth of the bakery. She was there to warm up her father's tea, just as she had done numerous times. The baker left her to it, and with his back turned briefly, he heard a horrific scream. As she leant down to the oven, her long, blonde hair had caught fire. Naturally panicking as the flames spread, she rushed out of the shop and down the street. As the wind hid, the fire only spread, and despite the best efforts of the baker, she was completely engulfed in fire. After it was extinguished, she was brought to the infirmary and pronounced dead. Ever since that tragic event, it is thought that the spirit of this poor girl still haunts Grape Lane. The crackling sound of fire rushing past has been heard, as well as the smell of burnt flesh hanging in the air. One account claims to have actually seen a burning figure staring them down in the street, only to vanish into thin air moments later. Moving north from Great Lane, we pass the White Horse and Griffin, dating back to the 17th century. These days, it's a popular pub, but back in the 19th century, it was run by a very cantankerous woman by the name of Mrs. Bowler. Apparently, it would take just one look for her to judge someone, and she'd be very forthcoming if she didn't like the look of you. One night, walking down the steps beside the inn, she slipped and fell, cracking her head on the steps and sadly dying there and then. Since, some visitors have felt either a sense of jubilant welcome when entering, or a dreadful feeling that makes them want to leave. Could this be the influence of Mrs. Bowler's restless spirit? We come now to Whitby's most famous landmark, Whitby Abbey, which is today under the stewardship of English Heritage. This place boasts a long and colourful history, dating all the way back to 657 AD, when it was founded by Abbess Hild as Whitby's first monastic site. Our ghost story here concerns the nun Constance de Beverley, who was at the Abbey in medieval times. Exactly when is not clear. It is said that she broke her vow of chastity after falling in love with a handsome knight, and was swiftly brought to justice as soon as her superiors became aware. She was bricked up alive in the dungeon of the Abbey, and it is said that her screams did not cease for several days until finally she died. All those years later, various accounts have reported hearing blood-curdling screams echoing around the Abbey, and a phantom nun has been spotted cowering, as if begging to be released. Could it be the restless spirit of Constance de Beverley? Another apparition reported here is the Abbey's founder, Saint Hilda. She has been spotted roaming the grounds and peering from one of the highest windows. It's also thought that every year on 6th of January, the old Christmas day, the sound of a choir can be heard at the Abbey. We finish our ghostly trail of northern Yorkshire tonight in Long Marston. Not far away from here, one of the largest and most decisive battles of the First English Civil War took place here. On July the 2nd, 1644, Oliver Cromwell lined up his parliamentary army against Prince Rupert of the Rhine, in command of the royalist forces. In 1968, a group of tourists sighted ghosts from the battle. They were lost and driving down Atterworth Lane, a small road which passes across the moor. They happened upon a group of what they considered to be tramps, stumbling along a ditch near the road. Curious, they slowed down to inspect the party of dishevelled men and realized that they were all wearing 17th century clothing. The consensus amongst the tourists was that they must have been battle reenactors, and as they were all agreeing on this conclusion, they realized that the men had disappeared completely. Here ends tonight's tour of Northern Yorkshire.